She showed up with a confirmed reservation, money in the system, name on the books, and they still turned her away like she didn't belong. Less than 24 hours later, she walked back in, not to check in, but to take over the building. This isn't a story about revenge. It's about what happens when dignity meets strategy. And if you've ever been looked past, talked down to, or shut out for no good reason, stay with me. What's coming next will feel like fresh air in a locked room. And if that feeling already hit home, tap like right now. Share this story with someone who's been counted out, and subscribe, because we don't just tell stories here, we correct the record. Sabria Varnell stood outside the Bell Ridge Regent Hotel in downtown Birmingham, Alabama, dressed in comfortable sneakers and a neutral trench coat, the kind of outfit designed not to provoke but to pass. Her reservation was booked under her assistant's name, as always. It wasn't secrecy, it was strategy. She preferred silence where noise would be wasted. Her driver pulled away, and for a few seconds she just stood there, looking at the building. It wasn't the tallest on the block, but it wore its facade like a politician's grin. Polished limestone, gold-trimmed awnings, and a pair of doormen trained to nod only at the right kind of guest. The hotel didn't welcome, it filtered. She adjusted the strap on her carry-on and nodded politely to the man at the door. He opened it out of habit, not respect. Inside, everything tried too hard. White marble floors that echoed like a chapel, crystal chandelier the size of a midlife crisis, perfume sprayed through the vents like a cover-up. A couple in designer coats sat near the fireplace sipping something in coupe glasses. A woman in heels the color of blood clicked past with a phone glued to her jaw. It all screamed curated, not cared for. Sabria had seen better-dressed lies. She stepped to the front desk with the kind of patience you only learn after being underestimated 100 times. "Reservation under Amina Travers," she said, calmly, clearly. The woman behind the desk, Callie, according to her name tag, kept typing, pretending to finish something, maybe real work, maybe a power move. Her blonde hair was tucked just right, her lipstick matched the crimson scarf knotted at her throat like a warning sign. Finally, she looked up. Not warm, not rude, just weighing. "That look, you know the one." "A moment," Callie said, then started tapping the keyboard like she was searching for excuses, not answers. After a pause, she tilted her head, eyebrows knit like the system had betrayed her. "I don't have any reservation under that name," she said. "Are you sure it was for tonight?" Sabria showed her the confirmation email, the kind with all the timestamps and barcode links that scream, "I did everything right." Callie barely glanced. "Okay, well, we're actually at full capacity, so I can't offer you a room tonight. There's a Courtyard Inn about 15 minutes away." Her voice was wrapped in customer service, but her eyes said leave quietly. No apology, no effort, just dismissal disguised as protocol. Behind them, a couple walked up, white, sharp, groomed. "Welcome to the Bell Ridge Regent," Callie chirped. "Do you have a reservation?" They nodded. "Devin Marks." Callie found it in 2 seconds flat, handed them keys with a smile like it was dipped in champagne. Sabria didn't say a word, not a raised voice, not a protest. She stepped aside, letting another guest move ahead. The hotel's acrylic sign gleamed behind the desk, 5-star excellence with southern charm. Funny how charm has a color code. She turned and walked out. No scene, no complaint form, no escalation. Because some fights aren't worth having on the battlefield they expect. Some fights are won in boardrooms they don't know you already own. Outside, the evening wind tugged gently at the hem of her coat. She pulled out her phone and called her assistant. "They shut me out," she said plainly. The pause on the other end was short but loaded. "You want me to push the meeting?" Sabria looked back at the hotel, the lights, the smiles, the polite rut under everything. "No," she said. "I'll be back in the morning." But not to book a room. What was coming next would shift more than front desk policies. It would rewrite the building's DNA. If this moment has ever mirrored your own, standing calm while being quietly erased, don't scroll past. This story isn't just therapy, it's blueprint. Tap like if you've ever had to swallow disrespect just to make it through the door. Share this if someone you know deserves to see how we flip exclusion into ownership. And subscribe, because this is just the first crack. The next part? That's when the doors stop deciding who gets to belong. The night air in Birmingham had the kind of calm that doesn't apologize for what came before. Sabriel rolled her carry-on down Fifth Avenue, her steps steady, her eyes clear. She wasn't flustered, she wasn't plotting, she was processing. You learn, after years of walking into rooms that make you feel like background noise, how to walk out of them without leaving pieces of yourself behind. The Bell Ridge Regent hadn't rattled her, and reminders, when you've built your entire life on persistence, aren't wounds, they're fuel. She rounded the corner and stopped in front of the Harwood Inn. Modest, brick exterior. No valet, no marble, just honesty and light in the windows. She rang the bell, and within seconds a man in a sweater vest and thick glasses opened the door like he'd been waiting for someone worth his time. "Evening, ma'am," he said, smiling. "Room for one?" She nodded. "You're in luck. Last one just opened up." No questions, no scan, no judgment, just welcome. The scent inside was lemon cleaner and something warmer. Maybe cinnamon, maybe thyme. She signed the check-in form, and as she did, her phone buzzed. A message from Amina, short and powerful. "Bellridge sale clears by 9:00. IMing tomorrow, want the car ready." Zabria didn't smile. She breathed, deep, controlled. The building that denied her just signed itself over without even knowing who it was shaking hands with. She replied simply, "Yes. And call Brandon. I want the transition files in the car." Upstairs, the room was quiet. Beige walls, a writing desk that creaked when she touched it. She pulled off her sneakers, sat on the edge of the bed, and opened her laptop. The transition binder was already in place. The Bell Ridge Regent had once been the pride of the district, a luxury name on the lips of city officials and old money, but time and poor judgment had turned it into a reputation liability with fancy curtains. That's what Holden Finch Partners specialized in. Resurrections with teeth. And Sabria? She didn't write stories for magazines, she rewrote cultures in silence. One acquisition at a time. She scrolled past the financials. Those were clean enough to pass, but crooked enough to require disinfectant. Staff records. HR flags. 3 internal complaints buried with non-answers. Callie's name flashed on the screen. 2 years at the front desk, no formal strikes, but plenty of guest comments hinting at selective courtesy. Sabria flagged her. Not for punishment, yet, for study. She moved to the investment deck. Acquisition terms were final. PR draft scheduled. Internal memo queued. The building didn't know it, but the woman they turned away would walk in tomorrow morning with nothing but a slim leather folder and the legal title to every inch of that lobby. Her tea had gone cold when there was a knock. The manager from downstairs stood holding a cup. "Chamomile," he said. "You looked like today was heavy." She accepted it with a nod. He paused at the door. "Whatever it was, it won't follow you here. You're welcome, truly." And just like that, the weight of the Bellridge melted into steam rising from a paper cup. Not because the tea had magic, but because respect, when given freely, heals faster than grand chandeliers and fake smiles ever could. She thanked him, then closed the door and let herself feel something rare in her world. Settle. And that's the paradox we live in, isn't it? That sometimes the richest places are the cheapest with grace, and the quiet corners, the ones no one advertises, hold the richest truths. If you've ever felt smaller in a place built to impress, or if you've walked out of a room and wondered whether the problem was you or their lens, remember this. What shuts you out today might beg for your guidance tomorrow, but only if you keep building your foundation deeper than their rejection. If that hits something in you, if you've ever had to choose your dignity over your comfort, don't walk away from this story. Tap, like right now. Share this with someone who's learning how to walk through the storm and still keep their hands steady. And subscribe, because tomorrow morning, Sabria doesn't return for a key. She returns with the contract. The real work? That starts in the next part. Morning crept into the Harwood Inn with the sound of a hose dragging across the sidewalk and a coffee pot sputtering somewhere down the hall. Sabria didn't wake up with a jolt. She didn't need adrenaline. She woke with purpose. Even as a child, she was up before the house stirred, already calculating how to move through a world that didn't always return her respect. Her phone screen lit up with Amina's morning brief. Legal team confirmed, transition packet secured, the car waiting out front. But before she even moved, Sabria sat still. Not to rest, to own her momentum, the kind of pause that says, I built this, now I aim it. She dressed with intention. Charcoal suit, clean white blouse, no heels, flat shoes, gloss, not lipstick, a braid tied low, power without performance. By the time she stepped into the car, her old life, the one that was denied a room less than 12 hours ago, was already dissolving in the rearview mirror. But she wasn't heading to Bell Ridge to prove anything. She was heading in because ownership isn't structural, and what was about to happen next wasn't personal, it was policy. The building hadn't changed, still draped in gold-trimmed arrogance, still trying to sell excellence with a southern drawl. But this morning it belonged to someone who didn't need the sales pitch. Sabria stepped out of the car at exactly 9:00, IMN folder in hand, and walked in without a glance toward the front desk. The same doorman opened the door, this time holding eye contact a little too long. Recognition flickered, but he said nothing. Neither did she. That was the first crack in the marble. Inside the executive lounge, Quentin from legal stood ready. Miss Varnell, your team's in place. Amina, 2 ops associates, and a bank transition officer were seated at a long oak table. The deal was already baked. Sabria reviewed the summary page one last time, not searching for errors, but anchoring the moment. 5 signatures later, it was done. Bell Ridge was officially under Holden Finch Partners. No press, no ribbon, just ink and silence. That's how real change signs in, quietly, before anyone has a chance to spin it. Bring in Dobson, she said, coolly. 10 sharp. But when the clock struck 10, she made him wait another minute. Not for drama, for rhythm. When he finally walked in, red-faced and slightly breathless, Sabria didn't offer a chair until she finished her sentence. That's when he realized this wasn't a ceremonial handoff, this was an audit. They reviewed HR irregularities. He pushed back on reopening complaint logs. It'll demoralize the staff, he said. She met his eyes. No, what demoralizes staff is watching the same broken things get swept under the rug. He didn't argue again. And this is where the old world flinches. Not when you rage, but when you regulate. Power isn't noise, it's structure. Sabria didn't threaten anyone. She didn't raise her voice. She introduced accountability like a mirror and let the silence after her sentences do the rest. That's when everyone in the room knew the gold trim could stay. But the rot behind it, that had a deadline. By the time the meeting closed, Sabria stood alone at the window, watching cars loop through the valet. She didn't feel victorious. She felt ready. Ready to walk the building, not as an investor, not as a guest, but as the woman who just rewrote its blueprint. And if you're still listening to this, maybe that's your blueprint too. Maybe you're not here to chase respect. You're here to install it, room by room, system by system. If that's you, then now is the time. Tap like if you've ever had to build where others refuse to believe. Share this story with someone who thinks changing the system requires shouting, because Sabria's showing us it takes paperwork, posture, and precision. Subscribe if you believe the best revenge isn't loud, it's legal. The next part? That's when we walk through the lobby, and Callie looks up. Sabria didn't walk down the Bell Ridge hallway. She moved through it, like someone who no longer needed permission. The executive lounge emptied behind her, the paperwork sealed, but the real transformation hadn't even started. She paused at the mezzanine stairwell, not for reflection but for observation. Downstairs, the lobby was doing its usual performance. Gloss posture, polished smiles. But this time the performance was off script. Her team had already notified the department heads. Some were scrambling, some were denying, and one was pretending none of it applied to her, at least, not yet. As Sabria descended, the doorman caught her eye again, this time with a flicker of uncertainty. Not fear, not familiarity. Something between them. He opened the door out of habit last night. Today, it was out of awareness. She walked right past the front desk, leather folder still tucked under her arm. Callie was there, typing, phone wedged between her shoulder and cheek. It took her a beat too long to notice, and when her eyes met Sabria's, the pause was ice-cold and 3 seconds too late. The recognition on her face was real, but what hit harder was the confusion, because it wasn't anger staring back at her. It was ownership. No words were exchanged. No need. Sabria turned the corner toward operations without a glance back. Power doesn't perform, it implements, and this next hour, it wasn't about making scenes, it was about making systems visible. She walked past the kitchen, where a young sous chef nearly dropped a tray when he caught sight of her. Rosario, the head chef, emerged from the walk-in, sleeves rolled, eyes skeptical. "You the new boss?" he asked without blinking. Sabria nodded. "You ever work a kitchen?" "No," she said, "but I've rebuilt places where people stopped expecting better, and I always start with the ones who keep the lights on." Rosario didn't smile, but his stance shifted. Respect doesn't always arrive with a grin. Sometimes it nods silently and gets back to chopping onions. Down the corridor, in the laundry unit, she met Minda. 20 years at the hotel. No voice in policy. No raise in a decade. Carrying more towels than any job description should justify. "Starting next week," Sabria told her, "you'll have a new schedule, updated machines, and, if I have my way, a raise." Minda blinked, not with disbelief, but with the kind of guarded gratitude that only shows up after being disappointed by promises too many times. "You really own the place now?" she asked. Sabria didn't flinch. "I do." And that moment, as ordinary as a hallway cart, was louder than any ribbon cutting. By the time Sabria returned to the elevator, her work boots had walked more value than most press releases could manufacture in a year. She pressed the button to the executive floor. As the doors slid shut, Callie reappeared in her peripheral vision, still stunned, still silent. Their eyes met again, this time no confusion, just the dawning awareness that the woman she dismissed yesterday now signed her evaluations. Sabria didn't smirk. She nodded. Not with vengeance, with clarity. This wasn't a takedown, it was a reset. And if you're still here, here's the heartbeat of it all. You don't change broken systems by shouting from the sidewalk. You walk in, you sign the deed, and then you fix what was never meant to serve you in the first place. If that idea stirred something in you, like a quiet storm starting to build, don't let it fade. Tap, like right now, if you believe leadership starts with listening, not posing. Share this with someone who's tired of empty seats at decision tables. And subscribe, because the next part isn't about replacing people. It's about retraining power to work in service of dignity. The executive floor was quiet, too quiet. That kind of hush you get in places where everyone's used to holding their breath around power. Sabria stepped into the meeting room overlooking the city skyline, sunlight spilling through floor-to-ceiling windows like a spotlight without a stage. She didn't sit right away. She stood at the head of the polished table, eyes scanning the printed agenda Amina had prepared. One word kept repeating across every page. Culture. That's what needed to be gutted and rebuilt, not just rebranded. Sabria didn't believe in workplace vibes. She believed in values you could audit. At exactly 1:00 p.m., the door opened. Hugh Dobson returned, this time with Ron Felder, the head of HR. Ron looked like a man permanently stuck between trying to prove he belonged and trying not to be blamed. His blazer didn't fit, his handshake was damp. He started talking before he even sat down. "We've brought the onboarding documents you requested. We can show you—" "I've already read them," Sabrina cut in. "They're outdated, cosmetic. No metrics, no DEI accountability, no pathways for correction. It's not a handbook, it's a brochure. Ron froze. Dobson cleared his throat. We've had strong satisfaction scores from most guests. Sabria raised an eyebrow. With certain guests, you mean? There was a beat of silence so sharp you could feel the page edges quiver. She continued, calm but clipped. I watched 2 guests walk in after me last night and receive full service. I stood at the same desk, reservation in hand, and was told the hotel was full. We're not discussing hypotheticals. This is about patterns and whether you allow them or correct them. Ron flipped open a manila folder she'd handed him. Inside were printouts of staff complaint logs, each one marked with highlighter where the wording hinted at bias, exclusion, or deliberate neglect. All of these, she said, occurred under your front desk lead, and all of them were closed without resolution. Ron looked sick. Dobson tried to intervene. Callie's young. She might lack awareness, but that's not malice. Sabria didn't blink. Awareness isn't the issue. Gatekeeping is. She paused, letting the air stretch thin. Bring her in. Ron hesitated. Now? Now, she said again. There was no drama in her voice, just direction. When Callie entered the room minutes later, the silence swelled like a pressure valve. Her posture was stiff, her eyes darting between everyone seated, then locking on to Sabria. You remember me? Sabria asked. From last night? Callie hesitated. Yes. I mean, I didn't know that I owned the building, Sabria offered. That's not the point. You treated me like I didn't belong, without hesitation. No check, no effort, just the assumption that I was a mistake in your system. Callie opened her mouth, then closed it. This isn't a firing conversation, Sabria said. That would be too easy. This is a realignment conversation. Starting Monday, you'll begin a 3-phase training series under a new program we're implementing, Respect Before Recognition. You'll have performance reviews, guest feedback loops, you'll shadow senior staff, you'll learn to listen before you label. Callie looked stunned. You're giving me another chance? No, Sabria replied. I'm giving this hotel a chance not to repeat you. The words didn't land cruel. They landed clean, and for the first time Callie nodded, not to agree, but to acknowledge. After she left, Sabria turned to Ron and Dobson. Starting today, every staff member with public-facing responsibilities will go through the same training. Anyone with more than 2 flagged incidents will be reassessed for retention. And I don't want to hear another word about protecting comfort at the expense of accountability. Ron adjusted his glasses. We'll start tomorrow. Dobson this time didn't argue. He simply stood, shook her hand again, and left without a closing pitch. And that's the moment people misunderstand about reform. It's not about the speech, it's about the structure. It's not the volume of change that matters. It's the velocity of what you refuse to tolerate anymore. Sabria wasn't running a hotel, she was building a system that trained respect into muscle memory, that taught courtesy as currency, not charity. If that strikes something real in you, if you've ever felt like you had to earn basic decency or seen someone dismissed just because of how they entered a room, then this story is yours too. Tap like if you've had to fight for space in rooms you already deserved to be in. Share this with someone who's rebuilding a system from the inside. And subscribe, because in the final part, we find out what happens after the policies land when the community finally walks through the doors. It didn't take a press release. It didn't take a ribbon cutting. It took one small decision after another, carried out with conviction, to shift the energy inside Bell Ridge region. By the end of the first week, the building didn't look different, but it felt different. Guests didn't know why the check-in process moved smoother or why the bellhops stood taller, but staff did. They noticed when the outdated manual disappeared and was replaced by something that actually named them. The new guide, Respect Before Recognition, had one line in bold on the first page: who someone is matters more than how someone looks. That was the new DNA of Bell Ridge. And DNA doesn't announce itself. It just replicates. 3 days in, Terrence from guest services knocked on Sabria's open office door. No clipboard, no nervous energy, just a man showing up because he'd seen enough to believe it was safe. "I just wanted to say," he said, standing with both hands behind his back, "it feels different already, like someone's finally noticing." Sabria didn't take notes. She didn't lean forward like a consultant. She just said, "Tell me what still feels broken." And that's what started the suggestion portal, an anonymous Dropbox where every employee could pitch, critique, and propose. The only rule? No retaliation. First submission, we need chairs that don't hurt our backs in the break room. Second, more visibility for the people who've been here the longest. Minda's name came up 3 times in the first week, so when the new staff recognition board went up behind the reception desk, her photo was dead center. 20 years of folded towels and no thank yous. Until now. A young bellhop pulled out his phone and took a photo of it, grinning like someone had just won an award. And in a way, someone had. That moment said more about the new Bell Ridge than any 5-star plaque ever could, because what good is luxury if it forgets who's been scrubbing the grout? But the real turning point came when Sabria stood near the lobby column, half hidden, watching Callie at work. This wasn't surveillance. This was study. Callie had been paired with a new mentor, Phuong Tran, a hospitality veteran with the kind of poise you can't fake. At first their sessions were tense. Callie stumbled, defaulted to guarded pleasantries, but Phuong didn't flinch. "Would you speak to your grandmother like that?" she'd ask. "Or try again. This time, imagine the guest doesn't trust you yet." One afternoon, a man in overalls with no luggage walked in, looking lost. Sabria watched as Callie greeted him with zero hesitation. "Welcome to Bell Ridge. Do you have a reservation, or would you like help finding a room?" No tone, no switch-up, just service. And that's how culture shifts, not in grand gestures, but in the split-second choices no one sees until it's already changed you. In the second week, community groups began reaching out. A local poetry collective asked to host rooftop readings. A nonprofit booked the ballroom for a career day for underserved students. These weren't the kinds of events Bell Ridge used to entertain, but they were exactly the kind Sabria wanted. She didn't say yes for optics. She said yes because this was the purpose. One night, at a scholarship fundraiser she personally funded, the ballroom was filled with thrift store suits, barred shoes, and nervous students standing shoulder to shoulder with city council members. No one flinched. No one looked out of place. Later that night, a young woman approached Sabria. Her name was Masha, barely 21, sweater dress and 2 big boots. "Miss Varnell," she said, voice shaking. "I just wanted to say thank you. I'm one of the scholarship recipients. I'm studying hospitality, but I want to own, not just manage." That made Sabria stop. She looked Masha in the eye and said, "I already am." They exchanged contact info. Nothing flashy, just 2 women with legacy in their eyes and future in their hands. The next morning, Sabria wrote a note, not a memo. A note, handwritten and pinned to the break room wall. "This place used to shine on the outside but stay hollow inside. Now it breathes. That's because of you. Keep making people feel like they belong, not because it's your job, but because it's their space too." Minda read it aloud to a new hire named Daryl and tapped the paper with her knuckle. "You hear that? That's how you know you're working for somebody who gets it. And maybe that's the heart of it. Real leadership isn't about having your name on a building. It's about leaving space inside it for everyone who never thought they'd be welcome. If that truth resonates with you, if you've ever been denied, underestimated, or made invisible, don't let that pain sit quietly. Tap like right now if you know what it means to open the door for someone else after you had to force it open for yourself. Share this story with someone who needs to hear that the quiet changes are the ones that last. And subscribe, because we're not done yet. Sabria's story is a mirror. And maybe it's time we all take a look.